Hello, and welcome all to today's ArtsVote 2020 event. The impact on COVID-19 on artists and the arts community and policies for the future. I'm Nora Halpern, Vice President of Leadership Alliances and Americans for the Arts. We've got a great program planned today, and we're excited to get started. But first, some quick reminders. ArtsU is our e-learning platform offering a variety of training options for those who work in the arts and cultural sectors. Visit artsu.americansforthearts.org to view upcoming lectures, panels, and events. Please note that this presentation is being recorded, and the recording will be available on our website in 1 to 2 business days or on the Arts Action Fund Facebook page if you want to view it right after this. Closed captions are available for today's event. To activate the closed caption, please press CC or the closed caption button at the bottom of your screen and then select Show Subtitle. We will be hosting a question and answer session at the end of the panel, so please submit your questions through the Q&A. To do this, click the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. If you see a question that you'd like to know the answer to, or one that is similar to your own, you may upvote that question by clicking the thumbs up button. Because of time limitations, we will be prioritizing those questions. You may also reply to other questions in the Q&A by pressing the comment button. Please keep your comments brief and on topic. For those of you watching us on Facebook Live, welcome, and please feel free to share and like this live video. Should you need any technical assistance today, please submit a request through the Q&A and a staff member will follow up with you shortly. And with that, I'm pleased to get things started and pass things off to my colleague, Nina Ozlu Tunjali, Executive Director of the Arts Action Fund. Take it away, Nina.
Thank you, Nora, and hello to everyone. And thank you to our panelists and our audience. This is the second of our ArtsVote virtual event panels. The first one we did last week, it was timed as the closing event, closing night of the Democratic Convention. And tonight it's timed during the closing night of the Republican Convention. Last week, we talked and launched the ArtsVote campaign of Make Your Vote Count. And today we're focused on some policy issues, especially as COVID-19 has had a devastating impact on artists and the arts community across the country. And today's panelists are going to focus on that. What we're going to do is I'm going to introduce our panelists in the order that they'll be speaking tonight. We'll have Bob Lynch, who's coming in from Cape Cod, Massachusetts, to talk about all of the research findings, late-breaking even news on the exact findings of how the arts have been impacted by COVID-19 and the pandemic. Then we'll have Annette Bening, Tony and 4-time Academy Award nominee and 2-time Golden Globe and Screen Actors Award winner and the vice chair of the Actors Fund to give some insight from her perspective. And then we'll follow with Ben Folds, who is a renowned musician and the chairman of our ArtsVote 2020 campaign. Both of them were on last week's panel and they join us on this week's panel. Adding to this week is Marianne Carter, who is the chairman appointed by the Trump administration to the National Endowment for the Arts to talk about the work that the endowment is doing and what she's seeing from the bird's eye view of arts organizations across the country, both their impact and their resiliency. And then we'll have Tori Allen coming in from Minneapolis, Minnesota, who is the president and CEO of Arts Midwest, representing the Midwest states from Illinois to North Dakota, South Dakota, and Missouri and Minnesota. And then we'll have a discussion, a broader discussion across the board. And the one thing I forgot to mention when I introduced Ben is that he's coming in from Sydney, Australia, still stranded in Australia, but not a bad place to be stranded. Now, Bob, I mentioned, is going to talk about the arts research, but one of the things that I'd like to just kind of give some highlights is there have been quite a few policies through the CARES Act and in addition to the CARES Act that have provided a lot of support for lots of industries, including the arts. Currently, with the payroll protection program, one of the best things that happened is that artists, gig workers, were for the first time considered a small business, so that they were able to partake in those paycheck protection loans along with nonprofit arts organizations and for-profit entertainment companies. The number is now at about $8.2 billion of support for that category. It has a few other things in it like recreation, entertainment, but for now what we know is that that category is $8.2 billion in support. The other thing that happened in the CARES Act is artists who are self-employed, many who are self-employed, normally don't have a chance to benefit from unemployment compensation because they didn't pay into it initially. But through the CARES Act, they got entitled to be able to also be eligible for unemployment compensation. And that probably yields billions of dollars as well of support. But we know that a lot of that support ended at the end of July. So we are looking very hard for policies to be adopted after Labor Day when Congress gets back into session to extend unemployment. There's a chance that the extra $300 that through executive order may be coming through, but it hasn't happened quite yet, but hopefully it'll be happening soon to provide assistance to a lot of artists across the country. And then finally, Marianne will talk about some of the money that she also got through to the NEA, 75 million there, but a total of 300 million for all the cultural agencies, including NEA, NEH, IMLS, which is the Institute of Museum and Library Services, and the Corporation for Public Broadcasting. And she'll talk a little bit about not only some of the funding and how it got brought to thousands of organizations across the country, but what she's also hearing about how they're surviving and what they're doing. So a lot of the materials that we'll be talking about are located in the resource tab of ArtsVote. If you've registered that way, including some of the research information that Bob is going to be presenting. So without further ado, I'd like to ask Bob Lynch, the president and CEO of both Americans for the Arts and the Arts Action Fund, to come and speak to us today.
Thanks so much, Nina, and Nora, thank you. Good evening, everyone. And I want to thank all of you, so many, for joining us and for the hard work that you are all doing to advance arts policy in these tough times. Right now, when we really need it, arts organizations and artists and community residents all need the help that that all of you are involved with. And so a special shout out from me to all of the state arts advocacy organizations and the local arts agency advocacy efforts and the regional arts and what they're doing along with the private leaders across the country. I also want to say special thanks to Annette and Ben and Tori and Marianne for being with us. It's great to have such a lineup, and I appreciate the time and your knowledge. Tonight's ArtsVote discussion, as Nina just said, it's part of a series. And if you take a look at the great work, invitation work, and ArtsVote slogan and design that Shepard Fairey did, you see that it talks about creative freedom and community freedom and jobs freedom and the economic freedom that go with the arts in our country. Those are things that we'll be talking about tonight. And last week, as Nina said, it coincided with the Democratic Convention. Tonight's coincides with the Republican National Convention, because we need arts policy makers and arts policy advocates on both sides of the aisle to get good policy created. It has to be a team effort. Incidentally, I was pleased last night to hear Second Lady Karen Pence talk about the value of the arts. She did it last night, calling out in particular art therapy as a critical, proven approach for helping the healing of returning wounded veterans, wounded service members and veterans. Mrs. Pence specifically called out Master Gunnery Sergeant Chris Stowe, a US Marine who was deployed in Afghanistan and Iraq for 6 tours and then came home wounded, physically and mentally and spiritually. But he credits art therapy at Walter Reed Medical Center for bringing him back. It was my honor to have Chris representing the American Art Therapy Association, joined me last year as a witness testifying to Congress on behalf of the arts and an increase to the budget of the National Endowment for the Arts and their great creative forces work, which works with Walter Reed and the medical military community. And with that, his strong and very compelling testimony helped us get that increase for the National Endowment for the Arts. He incidentally went on to work as a glassmaker, glass being one of the areas that helped him get through his wounds. And so with that, I am so happy that Chairman Marianne Carter is with us tonight, because I hope she'll be able to talk a little bit about that area as well. Tonight's topic is about a different struggle and a different sacrifice that's affecting all Americans and also our entire arts industry. It is something that is affecting us dramatically and is going to have not just short-term, but very long-term negative effects. And what I'm talking about is COVID-19 and its impact on artists and the arts community, tonight's topic. So a couple of things that I want to say. I want to set the stage with some data. Not always exciting, but I think critically important for us to make the case for the value of the arts. But essentially, the data that I'm going to be talking about, several different sets, collectively and separately, say three things to me, three simple things. They say first that the arts are, as an industry in America, bigger and more important and more powerful than anyone realizes. It's important to not only people who like the arts and the people who work in the arts, but to America itself. That's number one. Number two, the arts industry has been hurt badly and worse than many other industries and needs help. And number three, the data make a dramatic case for immediate and also long-term policies that invest in saving and rebuilding our arts industry. So those three things I think are important. So let's take a look at some of the data. The first thing is that there's good news pre-COVID. Multiple studies looked at the size and the impact of the arts industry. There's many of them out there, but I just want to touch base on three. One that's not shown here is one that Americans for the Arts does, called the Arts and Economic Prosperity 5 study. And we've been doing it now for many years, some 25 years. And it shows that the economic impact of just the 120,000 nonprofit arts organizations in America is $63.8 billion. And when you add in related spending, it's $166.3 billion. Now, I mention that because when we bring that information to decision makers, it's way bigger than anybody imagined. It's a huge number to them and was instrumental in helping get policies passed pre-COVID for more support for the arts, federal, state, and local. But what is interesting is that the other studies show even bigger numbers. So for example, the Bureau of Economic Analysis study by our own Department of Congress estimates the size of the industry at $878 billion. And a study that just came out yesterday by the Brookings Institute pegs that figure at twice the Bureau of Economic Analysis study. Now, why? Well, because different sets of data, different sets of kinds of organizations, different methodologies are involved. Our study studies only the 120,000 nonprofit arts organizations in America, and the BEA and Brookings study put in many, many other industries. But the power in those numbers shows what's at stake. What we as American arts community have built is huge and much bigger than anybody knows. So these multiple studies also show that the arts and creative economy, much bigger, as I said, the US Bureau of Economic Analysis tells us that the creative economy in the US, nonprofit, commercial, education, is an $878 billion industry, as I mentioned, and that is 4.5% of the nation's economy, a larger share of the economy than transportation, than tourism, than agriculture. And the arts also boast a $30 billion international trade study. Now, second point, the arts industry has been hurt badly by COVID in a disproportionate impact to other areas of our economy. There are multiple COVID-19 impact on the arts studies, all of which document its devastating impact on the arts and the creative economy. At Americans for the Arts, our research in that area shows that nonprofit arts organizations alone have lost to date $12.5 billion and 354 million admissions since the pandemic's onset. Arts organizations are the first to close and the last to open because we work closely, face-to-face with people. This has already resulted in a loss of 449,000 jobs. Our survey, second survey that we are doing of 24,000 artists shows that 63% of them have become fully unemployed as a result of the pandemic and expect to lose an average of $22,200 each in creativity-based income in just 2020. And that totals up to a $50.6 billion loss nationally. So these are some things that are huge. And then we have the Brookings study that shows even more devastation to the creative economy by the pandemic. Again, they surveyed a broader group of organizations, but they provide or predict industry losses of $150 billion and 2.7 million jobs, nearly a third of all of the jobs in those industries. The Brookings report also shows that the fine and performing arts, which is only one of about 8 areas that they studied, but largely the one in the first study, will be the hardest hit. Fine performing arts will be the hardest hit, suffering 1.4 million job losses, they feel, a whopping 50% of all fine and performing arts jobs. So even though the studies are different and they look at different things, they all say the same thing: big losses, big problems for the arts because of COVID. And then finally, the idea of these sets of data set the stage for us to make some serious policy asks. The stakes are large, not only for the arts, but for America. The early data helped us get support and get the policies passed for support. And particularly for the COVID early needs that Nina just talked about. Direct agencies like the NEA, money through SBA, the Paycheck Protection money, the emergency injury disaster loans, pandemic unemployment compensation, housing and urban development, lots of sources. But right now is the time that we have to do a lot more and can do a lot more for what would be a long-term help to our industry for the future. So with that, I am very, very excited to be with you. This new data plus ongoing data collection shows even more massive scale of devastation. And that is not good for the arts, but it's not good for America. The good news of the size of this industry shows both the massive need now, but massive promise for the future. And so thank you for listening, and I look forward to the discussion.
Thank you, Bob. Thank you. That was very, very sobering. I want to turn to our artists and first to Annette. So Annette, thank you so much for joining us again from your home in California. I wonder, can you tell us in terms of work and where you were when the shutdown began and how it impacted you and your family?
Sure, I'd be happy to. Thanks. And thanks for having me. I'm really honored to be here. I feel like I'm going to spend the rest of my life trying to say thank you back to the arts community just for my life, my arts education when I was a kid, my community college education and state college, and my work in the nonprofit theater where I started. Thanks to the NEA, we have this, partially and thanks to the NEA, we have this incredible nationwide system of nonprofit theaters. So thanks for having me. Yes, so quickly, in terms of the immediate impact in my world, I was about to work on an independent film. So independent films, of course, tend to be low budget, and that industry is basically shut down. And just to give you an idea of how many people that involves, of course, we have all of our drivers who are all, everyone's union, by the way, of course. And then we have drivers, we have all of our crew members, we have makeup and hair people, we have the grips, the electric people, the sound people, the makeup and hair people, all of the people that help us organize these productions, and of course the actors. So right now, in that industry, it's pretty much shut down. In the larger entertainment, in the larger movie industry, the more, the big studio movies, a few of those are up and going in other countries that have larger budgets to kind of manage testing and keeping a protocol going that keeps everybody healthy.
Wow. And then you think of all the ancillary businesses like the caterers and all of that sector.
Exactly.
That is impacted as well. So I want to turn to the Actors Fund, of which you are the vice chair, and like Americans for the Arts, I know that the Actors Fund has jumped into action as the onset of the pandemic became real to everyone. And it's a fantastic organization that has almost 140 years of history behind it. I wonder if you can tell us a little bit about the Actors Fund and let us know what the immediate response was by the organization and how they have continued to serve their membership as the pandemic shutdown has continued.
The Actors Fund, first of all, it's an organization for everybody in the entertainment world. So we really are more of an entertainment community fund rather than an Actors Fund, but initially we were named that. So we help everybody in our business. And when just to give you a sense of everybody in front of the camera, behind the camera, in front of the curtain, behind the curtain, everybody. So we're talking about stagehands and musicians and singers and dancers and box office people and ushers and hair and makeup people, everybody. And when the COVID hit, the Actors Fund really stepped up in such an organized way. I'm so proud to be a part of it because they very quickly went online and made money accessible to people. First of all, they helped organize lots of different fundraising efforts, but then also were able to quickly distribute it. So the Actors Fund has distributed about $15 million to over 12 million people, 15 million to 12,000 people. So they've really been incredible. You know, in show business, we're a pretty resilient group. We're used to working together. People aren't accustomed to really having to ask for help. And so the Actors Fund has really been absolutely phenomenal, working in collaboration with all the union leaders from all the various unions. We've gotten together and really tried to help people out. The Actors Fund's really involved in health insurance, education. We have a program called Every Artist Insured. We're trying to make sure that everybody has insurance. Of course, a lot of our people are insured through work. So it's been quite devastating for us, not only losing jobs, but losing our insurance. We have healthcare facilities. We have a senior care facility in New Jersey, which is absolutely first class. We're involved in affordable housing and all kinds of good stuff. By the way, not just in LA and New York, but all over the country. So for people out there who might need some help, understand that, you know, we can help you wherever you are in the country if you're involved in the performing arts and you need a hand right now, especially during COVID.
Beautiful, thank you. And as we look to the long-term effects of the pandemic, I wonder if the Actors Fund has started to shift its focus from relief to recovery, and if so, what that might look like.
Well, we're pretty much still in the thick of it. I mean, when you look at Broadway, that is that's a big part of our world. And Broadway, who would have ever thought that Broadway would totally shut down? But of course it is. As are all of our theaters all over the country. Any kind of live entertainment, as Ben knows, is basically shut down. So we don't quite know what it's going to look like. We just know that the tourist industry in New York City is really driven by Broadway, bringing everybody in. Then everybody stays in the hotels and goes to the restaurants and stays in the parking garages and goes to other tourist attractions as well. So we don't really know. We are the first to go out of business and the last to come back in, anything that has to do with live performance. So you all can help us with that.
Yeah, and actually, again, it emphasizes how the economic loss to the entire community is felt when the arts are taken out of a community and out of the ecosystem of restaurants, hotels, airlines, rent-a-cars, all of that.
Yes, and the arts has such a deep impact on our lives all the time, doesn't it? I mean, I know I really feel the lack of being able to go to a museum, to go to hear live music, to go to a Broadway show or a musical in my city. So I'm living in LA right now. So this is such an enormous impact on our lives in so many ways. And so many of us are out of work and in trouble.
It's true. Well, I thank you, and we'll have more questions at the end of the program, but thank you again for joining us. I want to turn to Ben. First of all, thank you for your leadership on ArtsVote 2020, and thank you for getting up so early in the morning in Australia. So good morning to you. And I want to start, Ben, with a similar question. You are in Australia because that is where you were when the shutdown happened. So tell me how, other than you're geographically stuck in a sense, not that it's a bad place to be stuck, how has this moment in time impacted your ability to work as an artist?
Well, I mean, I think the numbers that Bob laid out, that's what I'm seeing, and that's what I'm experiencing in my life. You know, like Annette said, there's way more people in this business than just the performers. And you know, what my experience has been with my crew and people I've worked with and promoters and people I know, the music business isn't accustomed to well, I think everyone knows how to shuffle, and unfortunately the music business is the fun business in a way, so people don't consider it a serious business. As a result, it is hard, I think, to get help and to even get a little sympathy for it. You know, like I've got guys who've been working with me for years, and I really don't know how they're getting by. I know some musicians that everyone out there knows who they are, who have sold everything and are driving around finding a place to live, and it's not good publicity for them to tell you this. So it's not widely known. I think we're a pretty proud group. I mean, musicians are the most fiscally conservative people I know, because we have to balance a checkbook, you know, like it has to be when you're driving the van to the show, 0-0, no gas, no go. That's it. And so we're really used to that. But this is an unfortunate test of that. I was mid-tour here in Australia, because we've never had a pandemic in our lifetime, no one knew when to shut down or what it meant or what social distancing was. And I think we were all suddenly caught by surprise. Many of us are realizing now this may be a year and a half. I think if anyone in any business was told their doors were shut down for 18 months, maybe more. I don't know how you survive that, really. I know that we will survive, and it's thanks to, it's thanks to organizations like this and NEA and what Annette is involved in, and lots of friends of mine are involved in, that seem like little side things for a while until now suddenly it's about people's lives and big business. But, you know, one of the things I'm most proud of in my work is that I'm a small business owner. You know, like I love my songs and everything, but there's something that makes you feel really proud about being part of a helpful part of the economy. You know, when we pass through a town, people are parking their cars and they're going to the cafes, and stuff springs up in these parts of town that are artistic. And we all know the arts leads the way on the economy in a lot of ways. It certainly leads interest. If you're interested and you're inspired, you'll spend your money. And that's what we do once we get a roof over our head and clean waters. We begin to find a meaning for life and find a reason to do it. And this time in 18 months from now, even, and when we come back and recover, I don't know how you recover from this either, but I know that we'll get through. I could go on, but that basically just listening to Bob's numbers and seeing those, I don't know anyone who's still employed. I think everyone's scrambling to get extra work, and there's some that are in their cars driving up and down the coast, finding house sitting situations, and they were in business. This is their job. It's big.
And you mentioned you are a small business owner, and I feel what you had said earlier about people not really thinking that artists do work because it's such a passionate profession that you don't really see it as a quote unquote typical job, but you are a small business owner, and you are, and for the very first time, we were very proud to be part of the movement to make sure that in COVID relief, gig workers and performers like yourself were able for the very first time to be considered small businesses so that they could get unemployment insurance and other forms of financial relief. So I feel that, and obviously you and your colleagues in the arts feel it even more strongly. So now that we see how we are at this moment in time, looking forward to the next 6 or 12 months, if you were to do some radical reimagining of relief to someone like yourself, a small business owner like yourself and your colleagues, what would that look like in terms of support for artists as small business owners?
Wow. I don't know. I really don't. I can't imagine. I mean, I think that it's all such about a shuffle. I can't imagine where that, I mean, I do know that, like, one silver lining maybe that comes out of something like this is appreciating the arts and their impact on the economy, which I feel like a lot of us are in the business or in the practice, with Americans for the Arts, and the things that I go out and tell people about the National Endowment for the Arts, ArtsVote, all the things that we're doing is taking it seriously as an industry and taking it seriously as work, and the impact that it has, not just arguing for it because art makes you feel good, because everyone knows that it does, but the impact is so great. And even artists themselves, a lot of musicians and performers really feel that they get shouted down to have a policy idea or shouted down to have a political stance. But what I tell all my musical homies is, first, you're a unique voice. Artists have a unique view. I have a unique view of the United States. I'm in a different city every single day, for one, and I see people in a different way. Yeah, I'm going to have a different view. And as well, artists have they have an impact in a part of the economy. So maybe there's a small silver lining to be had in that people really realize, they look at Broadway, for instance, like Annette was saying, and you think, gosh, how many of these businesses are not only negatively impacted by COVID itself, but by the absence of all the art, all of the performances, all the excited people. Someone comes to a cafe to get a drink or something before they go into a show. They're happy. That's a good audience to have. It's an inspired audience, and it's big. So as far as what is done, the idea that I would have ever been helped, subsidized in any way, given a hand, is so foreign to me as a musician. Zero has always been zero. I hear people talk about fiscal conservatism, and I think it's hilarious to hear that, because I think a musician and an artist, we know it's a broke ass life, and that's what you do. So I don't know. I mean, I wish I had an answer for that one. But I will say that I do hope that it's appreciated more. And any artists that are watching this, and these are the kind of things that get you involved for the future. We need you, and we need your voice, and your voice does matter.
Absolutely. Thanks, Ben. And the irony shouldn't be lost that as the sector is struggling, it really is the arts to which we all run to for solace and feelings at this time. And as I'm staring at this beautiful backdrop that was designed by another member of our artist committee, Shepard Ferry, it's really what feeds us. So we will continue to work on ways that it will continue to feed you, literally feed you. So I'm going to turn it back now to Nina with many thanks, and we'll get back to more questions with the both of you later. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Nora. I'd like to now bring Marianne Carter into the discussion. Marianne Carter, as the chairman of the National Endowment for the Arts, you're seeing from a bird's eye view what's happening to the nonprofit arts organizations across the country and what some of their needs are and how you've been able to step up to that challenge. Can you give us a little bit of insight from your perspective of what's going on?
Sure, absolutely. And thank you for having me. What an honor to be on a panel with all of these distinguished people, and Bob and Nina and Nora. You know, the reason a lot of the things you talked about early on, such as CARES money for the National Endowment for the Arts and the definitions of gig workers, all that doesn't just happen. It happens because of groups like Americans for the Arts and because of all the hard work you put behind it and that your membership puts behind it. So thank you for all that you do. And one of the big influences you did have was making sure there was money in the CARES Act funding for the National Endowment for the Arts and some of the other cultural agencies. And so we got 75 million within 3 weeks. We had put up our guidelines, and what a lot of people don't understand is we didn't just get the money and we could cut checks. We have a huge process that we go through, and it usually takes 6 months. We were able to cut it all down into 2 months, but we got the first 30 million out very quickly to the states. By law, 40% of the money is allocated to the states. And then nonprofit organizations will apply for a grant. And so we had to go through that whole process and also jury the applications. We had over 3,100 applications. We were able to provide 855 grants to these nonprofit organizations. You can clearly see demand was so much greater than supply, and it still remains that way. But between the states and our direct grants, we're estimating approximately 5,000 to 6,000 organizations did get some type of financial help. And then, of course, you have organizations like the Actors Fund that Annette is part of, and a lot of the state art agencies and a lot of the philanthropy foundations have put together funds. So everyone wants to help and everyone's trying to help, but as Bob said at the beginning, it's devastating. The COVID-19 is devastating to the arts community. And it needs all the help it can get. And doors aren't opening soon. There are some doors opening and people are being very careful about it. They're trying to see if there is an audience out there that is willing to come in, but we're all in an experimental phase right now. And so, so we don't really know what the future holds or how long that future is going to be. And Nina, if I could talk about sort of parlay on to some of the stuff Bob talked about, and both Annette and Ben. Both Annette and Ben talked about the domino effect that the loss of these jobs has. So a theater, for example, we know the actors and actresses are out of work, but then you think about everyone behind the costume makers, the stage managers, the AV people, the people who sell the tickets, the people in doing commissions up front. And then the restaurants or the hotels if they're from out of town. So you see that effect. And what Bob talked about was that 30,000 foot effect. And with all the different surveys that he mentioned and all the loss to the economy and the loss of jobs. But I'd like to drill that down a little more from maybe the 30,000 foot view to the 30-foot view, because we talk about the impact on the artists and the art institutions, but we don't often talk about the impact beyond that. And I'm talking about the everyday artists and the organizations that are in our local communities and, you know, have major impacts on their community. And so when artists aren't earning money, they're not working and organizations are closed. And obviously that affects those workers and their families financially, of course. But we also need to look at the impact that is having on society and our communities. There are thousands of artists who work with our veterans, as Bob was talking about, who are dealing with PTSD and our injured active military men and women who might be suffering from traumatic brain injury or some other health issue. If these artists aren't getting paid, that means they're not working. That means our service members aren't getting the help they need and deserve. And that's a problem for society. Think of artists working in our senior care facilities. This has special meaning to me. My father spent the last 18 months of his life in a memory care facility. And one of the reasons why we picked the place we did is because they had 2 art activities a day. And usually the first one was a craft and the second one was music typically. And they might have a guitarist come in or a pianist come in and they would play. And often they would play songs from the days of my dad's youth. And so residents of this facility, some who didn't know their name, didn't know their kid's name, they knew the words to every one of these songs from their youth. It was an amazing thing to see. And seniors, especially seniors with Alzheimer's or dementia, they're already so isolated, and COVID-19 has made them even more isolated. And if we don't have artists working, that means they're not going into these facilities to help our seniors, and they're just becoming even more isolated. And then I think about the artists who are in our juvenile justice facilities and our prisons, and there's a lot of them. Why is this important and vital? Because we know through empirical data that these youth and prisoners who participate in art activities while they're incarcerated have a much lower recidivism rate. And that's extremely important to society in terms of safety and frankly in keeping these young people and the adult prisoners out of jail and giving them a chance at life. And maybe the biggest impact of all, thousands of artists make a living working in our nation's schools. And this is a huge impact. Why? Because we have data that shows, again, empirical data that shows a child with arts in their education, they stay in school, they get better grades, they are more likely to stay out of trouble, and they are more likely to go to college. And with this unpredictable and uncertain education system right now because of COVID, it's more important than ever. So we talk about the artists and the devastation and who are arts organizations, but it goes so beyond that. The hidden impact of COVID-19 that you don't hear about on other parts of society are going to have significant consequences.
Wow, I'm really struck by bringing it home to how it impacts the community. Yes, it's impacting our industry, but much of our industry is there to serve the public.
Yeah.
raising the point of how it's impacting the public is really quite significant. The arts also had a very big role in something that's being celebrated as a 100th anniversary this month, and that is the centennial of the women's suffrage movement to vote. And the NEA also played a big role here in commemorating that. Could you tell us about a publication that you released this week called Creativity and Persistence, Art That Fueled the Fight for Women's Suffrage, which you can find in the resource tab, and it's being posted as a URL on our Facebook. Go ahead.
Great. And you can find it at arts.gov. Yeah, so obviously yesterday was the 100th anniversary of the 19th Amendment being ratified into the Constitution. And it was a very significant milestone and a really important one. And I should note, the amendment was to allow all women the right to vote, but not all women were allowed to exercise their right to vote. And it's really important that we point that out, especially for women of color. And for some, it took decades before they actually were able to vote. And so I always want to recognize that it is a very significant milestone, but not all women could vote. But what it did was it empowered women, and it gave them the autonomy to participate in movements after that, such as the civil rights movement. And so the book in particular is about how the arts were used to sway public opinion, because the arts can cut through very complex messages and make it very simple and easy to understand, and sometimes just visually to understand it. But what is so interesting is when you look at it was poetry, and it was prose, and it was the visual arts, it was postcards, it was cartoons, it was fashion, it was song that helped push the message for women's suffrage. And so to honor how the arts were used, if you don't mind, I'm going to put the book up. We did put a book together, and it's all about how the arts did fuel the fight for women's suffrage. And it is downloadable free. As you said, the links are there. And we also have it on audiobook. So anyone can go and download the book. And thank you so much for mentioning it.
Yeah, it's a really great book, and I recommend it to everybody. Okay, so now I'd like to bring in Tori Allen into our conversation and look at things more at a regional and local level. Tori, as I mentioned, represents Arts Midwest, which represents a group of state arts agencies, all of them recipients of some of this CARES Act money in addition to his agency. And talk about what your agency is doing at a regional level, what you're seeing, and what you can share in terms of some of the resilient things that arts groups are doing during the pandemic.
Okay, well, thank you, Nina. And it's great to be here with everybody, with folks I admire so much. As a relative newcomer to the Midwest, one of the things that I love most about living here is those country drives along miles and miles of cornfields. During those drives, I'm inspired to reflect on how important farming and agriculture is to the health of our region and our nation, and how resilient that sector is by having to manage harsh weather variations, pricing fluctuations, and crop disease, and how much now, especially during COVID, the arts sector in the Midwest has in common with the farming community. In my opinion, COVID is only making us more like the farmer in the face of struggles, more determined and more resilient. At the macro level, thanks to support from the Millen Foundation, Arts Midwest, along with its 5 sister U.S. regional arts organizations across the country, launched the United States Regional Arts Resilience Fund to augment the CARES Act funding from the National Endowment for the Arts. In the 9-state region covered by Arts Midwest, which includes the great states of Illinois, Indiana, Iowa, Michigan, Minnesota, North Dakota, Ohio, South Dakota, and Wisconsin, we're making a huge COVID-related pivot in how we show up for and partner with the folks we serve. We've more than doubled our grant making over the previous year from under $2 million to more than $4 million. 60% of our relief fund grantees are new folks that are doing amazing work with substantial social and economic impact in a wide variety of communities across the Midwest, as Marianne was mentioning. Also, we've launched new conversations with arts advocacy leaders in our region to brainstorm ways to work together as a united collective in the presence of potential regional and national funding partners. At the state level, our state arts partners are beautifully steadfast in their commitments to their communities. Some of our states, like South Dakota, rely heavily on tourism dollars that have been stunted by COVID. The folks in South Dakota immediately took it to multiple digital platforms to support their constituents, and they launched a relief fund. In fact, all of our state arts partners have launched relief efforts, everything from converting restricted project funding into general operating support to modifying grant application processes and reporting requirements. And these folks are doing this work under enormously stressful circumstances, including reduced staffing, furloughs, and a lot of uncertainty about the future. Amazing resilience there. And the resilience is no less vibrant at the local levels. For example, at ArtsWave in Cincinnati, they are facilitating mergers and shared service efforts as a way to increase efficiency in the sector, and they're prioritizing a portion of their funding for organizations and artists of color. They're absolutely modeling the very best way to show up during times like these. And closer to the ground, numerous examples come to mind. In Dubuque, Iowa, this summer, during the Iowa Arts Summit, one of the fabulous creative workarounds was rooftop performances at downtown buildings with audience seating in the surrounding street level parking lots. In the Twin Cities, the Mixed Blood Theater here, unable to produce their works, pivoted their entire focus on the community and operated as an emergency food shelter for their neighbors. When the North Dakota Museum of Arts closed their doors to the general public because of COVID, they began launching a project they called Art in Isolation. And that effort drew submissions from 40 countries and 39 states and has greatly expanded their global footprint. The director there tells me that some of the new audience from across the world can hardly wait till we're past COVID so they can visit the museum and North Dakota in person. And just imagine the economic gifting to that community and beyond as hundreds of tourists make visiting that museum and exploring North Dakota a priority in their future vacation planning. So like the farmers, the artistic communities across the Midwest are embracing a creative spirit that not only has them weathering struggle, but figuring out how to keep planting seeds, to keep sowing, to keep the crops growing, and in doing so, feed many other people and impact many other parts of our communities. As Marianne said, it's a fine ecosystem, and there's an amazing resilience that's surfacing from my perspective.
It's beautiful, Tori. Thank you so much. It's so inspiring, and I have to just say that what I'm hearing from everybody is so intrinsic to the power of artists and those who work in the arts, is this nimbleness that we all are able to manage and come to the aid of people in need, in organizations in need. And one of the things I really want to thank Marianne for and the NEA for is something that we didn't really get to talk about, but in this moment of crisis where people needed funds so immediately, the NEA, which usually, as most funders do, have lots of restrictions in terms of, or not restrictions so much as things you must do to get your funds. And all of those hoops, whether it was matching or certain forms that need to be filled out, the NEA was so gracious and so aware of the need for the nation that these usually typical things that one has to do to get a grant were lightened up and lessened up so that the money could go where it was needed. And it sounds, Tori, in your communities as well, there was this sense of must help now. What can we do to help now? And I know that the Actors Fund did exactly the same thing. Let's figure out a system where we can get dollars in place as quickly as humanly possible for an organization. So thank you all for everything that you have done during this really challenging time. It shows a sense of resiliency and also a sense of a better future that I think is what a lot of us drives us, most of us, to the arts as inspiration. So I'm going to ask all of our panelists to unmute themselves, and we're going to start a general conversation. I want to start with a question for Ben, if I can. I know, because I've had the pleasure of coming to a lot of your concerts, that the VIP moments, you know, the ones that you offer before your concert and then the meet and greets that you have after, are really important for you. And that one-on-one as a performer, that human to human contact, is really part of what drives you as an artist. So how do you see yourself interfacing with your fans at this moment, which I know you're doing virtually, but both in the physically, how do you see it in the near term and then in the long term?
Well, first of all, I want to say it's thanks, Tori. It's inspiring to think about redirecting energy. And it's one thing, I mean, we have to get our heads around what's happened. And so I feel like, first of all, it's all the bad news, and it's just really nice to hear that. I think what we do at shows is sort of an opportunity for me to learn about each city. Like, we bring in for a while, it was a school teacher, like a music teacher would come, and we'd have a conversation about that. For a while, it was the National Endowment for the Arts. It was like taking time before each show to talk to locals about what the NEA actually does, because they were under the impression that it was a commie organization with a bunch of angry latte sipping people, and so it's good to just have that in person. Now over this period, I've been I've been offering my time to teachers, music teachers that want to get on a Zoom, and we talk directly to some kids. It's always been important to me as a musician. I think it's kind of built into entertainers to want to be useful. So that is the first way I thought to be useful, was to try to help teachers in their virtual. Now, going forward, I'm actually way up for hearing as many ideas as possible from my audience, from you all. The things that Tori was talking about is inspiring, the redirecting of things. At my scale, be difficult to kind of like go up on a building and really do something that wouldn't upset the neighbors. But there've got to be so many and we're in the creative business. Like, arts is about creativity. So we will figure out a way around it. But I mean, if I was going to take 2 seconds to use the platform, I would say, actually, I need the ideas more than I can actually give them now. I mean, what I can do is virtually try to lend a hand in this way, in these kind of forums, and for teachers and for people that I know that need it. But I'd love ideas on how, this is going to be a long thing. Even when we recover, it won't really be recovering. People aren't going to come out the same way. A lot of people won't have the same kind of jobs, but we might be able to figure out something, even art forms that didn't exist before.
Right. Yes, send those ideas in, and we have an active artist think tank community that Annette has been participating in really proactively in terms of gathering artists together and thinking these issues through. Annette, I have a quick question for you, and then we have questions from the collective who are watching us. I know that you have a film, Death on the Nile, in which you're one of the stars, that's scheduled to open in October. So how are you preparing for what that might look like? And do you think, how do you think theater going is going to move forward as the whole new wave of summer films are waiting to launch, and now the fall films and soon the Christmas films?
Well, for Death on the Nile, they are opening in the UK, and theaters are open right now in the UK. So people actually can go to the movie theater. I think they're still hoping that the movie theaters will be open in the United States by then, by late fall. But whether they are or not, I really don't know. And whether they're going to end up having to stream it, I'm not sure. But we're doing Zoom things like this to talk about the work that we've done. One thing I just wanted to touch on, and I know we have so many things we're trying to talk about, but one thing that I know Marianne is working on and all of us are thinking about is arts education and how the COVID is affecting our kids who depend on their arts education basically to keep them going to school, whether it's music or dance or theater or visual arts. So I know that I'm just one of so many people that are so worried about all of our kids. And I mean all of our kids, because that's the thing that Marianne spoke to so eloquently, that the National Endowment makes sure that everybody is touched by arts education. And I know that I'm interested in doing whatever I can to try, like Ben was talking about, trying to double down and making sure that kids who are at home and you know, going to school virtually don't completely lose their arts education and feel disconnected in that way. I'm really concerned about that.
Yeah, and tune in next month. We'll be doing a Zoom on exactly that topic with Josh Groban and his mother, Lindy, as a couple of the panelists. Lindy was a LA Unified School District arts teacher. So in addition to having two very creative sons, she also was a teacher and understands firsthand that the vital nature of that arts education. And it's a time for us to honor all the parents who are now trying to fill that role at home. It's a lot.
Nora, we're at the top of the hour, but I think if we can indulge our speakers to stay on just a few more minutes to take a few questions from the audience, that would be terrific. So for those listening in, we'll probably go for about another 5 or 10 minutes. One of the most prominent questions that repeats quite often in the questions section of today's panel is information about the future. People are worried about studio artists being evicted because they can't pay rent. There are questions about, Tori, you brought up things happening in rural areas where they were already undernourished monetarily in terms of funding for the arts. It's only worse, doubling the effect there. What do you see in your crystal ball happening, or what do you see happening at the local level that are helping things? And same, Marianne, with you, and then Bob, in terms of legislation, I can also probably answer some of these too, but in terms of legislation, what's coming down the pike in terms of being able to provide assistance after a lot of this short-term relief has ended now? What's coming down in the future? So Marianne, Tori, do you want to start first?
Marianne, would you like? Oh, I can just say quickly from my level, what's becoming increasingly important is the need to partner like never before. We have to connect with folks we have never connected with in the sector, outside of the sector, and come together, because there is that uncertainty. But I do think if I have this image of all of us holding hands and overcoming our vulnerabilities and our fears and standing together to withstand this. So that's a big focus of mine, is just overriding any resistance to partnership, because we absolutely have to unite with as many people as possible now.
That's great advice.
Yeah, and I'll second what Tori just said. I say in remarks a lot, we're in this together, because we really are in this together. And we've done different calls with all the service organizations. And I think what COVID-19 in an odd way has brought all the disciplines together in a way that I don't think they had worked together before. Some might have worked with the other, but now everyone's united to try to figure out that way forward. So there are a couple things being done. Of course, the main thing is everyone wants to survive and get their doors open. I mean, that's really the main thing. And so we did a survey with all the service organizations, kind of talking about their fears and their anxieties and what they were doing. And we put all that together. And there are some disciplines and of course, members within each discipline that are really pretty far ahead. Dance USA was one of those, in fact. You know, studios are starting to reopen. My daughter's a dancer. Her studio has reopened and they're rotating. Sometimes you're in, sometimes you're on Zoom. So they are coming up with ways to do some creative things. And this is a creative community, so we can come up with creative ways to do things. And, you know, I don't want this to all be doom and gloom, because there are a couple really positive things that have happened out of this. I know that probably sounds nonsensical, but by having to pivot to online, the disciplines, the artists, they have developed new audiences. People who didn't know some of these disciplines existed. People who may have never stepped inside a theater are watching plays online or watching musical theater online. Perhaps someone who never thought they could dance now taking a master class. And so the disciplines have developed, and artists in particular have developed new audiences. The key there is to figure out, how do we make that economical now? You know, how do we keep them? And then once venues are open, how do you get them in the door to see the live show? And then the second really positive thing, I think, is, you know, all the disciplines have conferences every year, and all those conferences were moved to online. But because they were online and not in person, their registration went up 2, 3, 4 times more than they typically have in person. So we actually now have more artists participating with their service or their national organizations. And I think that's a great thing, because that's really developing the community even more also. And so, you know, Tori was very upbeat, and I want to sort of leave us on an upbeat note, because it is devastating, but there are things that are going to come out of this that are going to improve the industry.
And Bob, you want to talk about policies that might be upbeat, possibly, for the future to help with this?
Yeah, well, I'm sorry I had the assignment to deliver all at the beginning, because I'm really positive.
Someone had to do it.
A couple of things that strike me. The first is, you know, we've talked about areas of temporary relief that we've been successful in going to. Besides extra money for the agencies specifically for relief, the SBA and the pandemic insurance, unemployment insurance, and HUD, and other agencies of government, other departments. And so what is going to be coming up is us going back to all those places for more short-term and perhaps some long-term help. And not just at the federal level, but at the state and local level. So, you know, local government has a lot of power, just like state and federal. They actually are the biggest public funder of the arts in America at the local level. And ordinances and special taxes, and the mayors are very, very helpful and very interested, along with the League of Cities and along with the counties, National Association of Counties. So I see us doing a number of federal thrusts, but also federal, state, and local. The other thing I just want to point out is the way that we work to try to get legislation in front of Congress is we work with 85 other national service organizations, like Dance USA, for example. Every year we pull somewhere between 75 and 100 national arts organizations together. Actors Fund is another. And we come up with a dozen things that we collectively advocate for. Arts education money, for example, international money at the State Department, a variety of things, including the budget of the National Endowment for the Arts. And we have been doing well in the last years, but now it's compelling to do even more. So, for example, the National Endowment for the Arts, we've been getting successfully $5 million and $6 million increments. The Action Fund wants $1 per capita. That bumps it up to, to $350 million, just as an example, as a next step. Now, there are, interestingly, other proposals out there for even more. Marianne can't talk about it, but she can be delighted by it, that there are some really big thoughts out there. I was struck by Ben's comments when asked about what did he need or what could help and so on, because in what he said, I saw lots of things that we can work on. So for example, I was particularly compelled by the image of people hunting around for rent and for places to live. So the idea of housing help and rent subsidy on a temporary basis, or even something to do with the long-term help. Actors Fund does a lot of that kind of work. Something in that area, something in the food help area, something in the temporary jobs area. Now, one thing that's happening out there is many organizations have this idea, and we've been convening them to think about the idea of some kind of a new federal jobs program, temporary program, like the WPA or like CETA. And that is something that I think might have some legs. We've heard from people on both sides of the aisle about this as something to be thought about, something to be considered. I was also struck when in thinking about that the first artist I brought to the United States Congress to testify back in 1985 was E.G. Marshall, actor who some of you may know, wonderful man. And he was a WPA artist. So this link that we have is not a long, long time ago. It's in our lifetime, or at least mine, because I'm the oldest person here.
And to remind us, the younger folks, WPA stands for?
Works Progress Administration. But
Roosevelt Administration.
100,000 jobs to artists, all kinds of wonderful artists, many of whom went on. They wouldn't have stayed in the arts, but they went on to have great careers. Like Ralph Ellison, for example, the writer of Invisible Man, was a WPA artist, and also one of our board members way back. Many other things. And those are short-term things that I was just talking about. And then some things that I was thinking about long-term, help to venues, because Ben needs places to perform. And if venues aren't there, he's not going to be able to perform. Marketing help to artists on how to rethink product and how to rethink delivery systems. And also, again, with Ben, we were talking about him tinkering with the guitar because he doesn't like the electric piano that he has these days. But what about some money for new work, experimentation and subsidy during this time, the making of work? Because making of work was really hurt badly, according to our data, along with what artists were suffering. So with all of that, those are some things that I see coming down the road in policy.
Okay,
I think
very much. Ben, go ahead.
I was just going to say quickly, I think a lot of my peers who are musicians would be very happy to be part of teaching during this period of time. And we talk about kids, staying interested in music. I'm sure Josh Groban would be down. I know a lot of people who might be. I think we're maybe lacking an organization there. But Bob, that's just struck me that we're kind of short two things. I'm a musician, and I didn't really even know how to unmute my Zoom, so I could use some help on how to do it. But if we organize it the right way, like Tori said, camps coming together that normally didn't, I'm sure that we could have a pretty big program of out of work musicians who are happy to spend some of their extra time teaching kids, and kids get a different kind of music teacher suddenly.
Fantastic. It's fantastic.
It's not just about the kids. I need lessons too. I'd love that idea. So I'm ready. I've been playing the same 6 chords for a long, long time. So
That's
teach
great.
that 7th.
Nora, I'd love for you to close us out. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you,
And
Nina.
remember, the artists are essential workers too.
Yeah, this has been such a beautiful conversation, so much passion and so much sort of future forward, despite the realities that we're all wrangling with on every level of our existence. So I want to thank all of the panelists, and thank you to everyone who attended and participated in today's ArtsVote 2020 event, the impact of COVID-19 on artists and the arts community and policies for the future. Whether you're here through our ArtsVote portal or Facebook Live, we so appreciate that you chose to spend this time with us. I want to remind you that this event was recorded and will be available for replay on the Arts Action Fund website in a couple of business days, or immediately. If you haven't had enough, you want to do it right all over again, you can go onto the Arts Action Fund Facebook page. So please visit us at artsu.americansforthearts.org for other training opportunities, panels, and resources. I want to thank from the bottom of my heart Marianne, Tori, Annette, Ben, and my colleagues Bob and Nina, as well as Morgan Fernari, Jarrell Jenkins, Ruby Lopez Harper, Pauline Pereira, Heather Pollock, and Connor Stanfield, who were helping us behind the scenes to get things moving along. I also want to thank Christy Walker for her closed captioning skills. Thank you for that. And thank you to all of you. I hope you have a beautiful, safe, and healthy night and future. Thank you to all of you. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.